Hello, my name is Chris Smith. I'm professor and chair of musicology and director of the Vernacular Music Center at the Texas Tech University School of Music, and I wrote a book called Dancing Revolution. And I'm honored to add my voice to all those others raised in support of Scholars Strike and Black Lives Matter. My presentation today is entitled Wheelabout and Turnabout, hashtag 500 years of hashtag BLM. Active resistance by minority people, black, indigenous, and people of color, has existed in the New World as long as Europeans have been invaders here. Indigenous peoples of Southern, Middle, and Northern America, of the Caribbean, and of a host of outlying zones throughout the African diaspora have fought against the injustice practiced by racially excused greed. BIPOC people, even when silenced, have always known exactly what was happening to them and have found many avenues to resist and subvert mistreatment, exploitation, torture, and death to turn the wheel and slip the net. They've done it with guns, and they've done it with songs. They've done it explicitly and outwardly, and they've done it inwardly and with great subtlety. In this presentation, I hope to sketch a small outline, a few postcards from the front lines of a 500-year struggle for justice, especially in the defiantly creative act of performance. Slavery existed in order to create wealth. A host of social justices and human suffering emerged from it, but at its core, slavery was about profit. Racism, class war, inter-immigrant conflict, religious fundamentalism, all were exploited, fomented, exacerbated for this central purpose, and the industrialization of human lives created fortunes for owners. Treating humans as property, their lives and experiences as disposable or forgettable, eliciting their labor and their obedience with psychological and physical torture, lowered costs, and raised profits. Slave owners made pragmatic decisions about all aspects of their slaves' experience, from worship to language to workload and to performance expressions, and it was all always about profit. Slave owners, and whites since slavery ended, even monetized expressive performance. Solomon Northup, who wrote 12 Years a Slave, himself says that he survived because he was more valuable to his owner as a fiddler playing for whites dancing than he was as a field hand picking cotton. Slave owners lent both workers and musicians to one another, or bartered their services from one season to the next, and then the resulting cultural performances whites often found fascinating. For example, in Singing the Master, the folklorist Roger D. Abrahams explores the phenomenon of Deep South corn husking, when the slaves of one plantation would be sent to compete with those of another to see which group could shuck a pile of dried corn faster and locate the bottle of whiskey hidden as a prize at the bottom of the pile. And when that job had been done, there'd be a celebration, and whites from around the vicinity would come to watch and even join in the singing and dancing. And this gets at a crucial factor in black performance's subversive success. It worked. It engaged. It entertained. It charmed and disarmed, even as it subverted. This, the double consciousness of W.E.B. Du Bois, the black skin and white masks of Frantz Fanon, this black performance thus became a site for subversion, immersion, white voyeurism, cultural exchange, and cultural resistance. In the Northeast, in the 18th and early 19th century, the Afro-Dutch holiday of Pinkster, a synthesis of West African and Calvinist Pentecostal celebrations, became a site for such exchange. Likewise, Negro Election Day, a parody of national election days, was likewise an occasion for festival, eating, drinking, dancing, and music. Pinkster and Election Day were in turn theatricalized on the working class stage in the early 19th century, and those festive celebrations became the basis for blackface minstrelsy, the phenomenon of working-class white performers blackening their faces and performing imitations and loving theft of black street musics. In the Caribbean and the Southeast USA, similar seasonal festivals like Junkanoo and Carnival mirrored the synthesis of European house-visiting festivals and West African seasonal celebrations through masking, costuming, rebellious noise, and music. In New Orleans, the clangorous iron bands and Mardi Gras Indians celebrated both seasonal holidays and rebellious thinking and provided a direct link between European traditions of Carnival and Afro-Caribbean festival. At the bottom of the economic scale, poor whites, many of them immigrants, interacted, willingly or unwillingly, with free blacks, with slaves, and with indigenous people, and willingly or no, exchanged ideas about music, language, food, and the sacred. At Congo Square in New Orleans, which was a mobile market long before it was ever sequestered on the north side of the French Quarter between the walls of the old city and Treme, BIPOC people and poor whites met and mingled, and new art forms arose. And across all of these celebrations, and down through blackface minstrelsy, and its borrowings in post-war minstrelsy, with both blacks and whites darkening their faces, and then into vaudeville's borrowings from blackface, and into early radio, and then early live television, black resistance took shape as a subversive, coded language of theatricalized rebellion. Black resistance, when performed, had its own unique power, and it still does. The trickster character who had come from West Africa as Anansi the Spider was immortalized in the recent American Gods TV series, before the actor Orlando Jones was released because his character allegedly sent the wrong message. Elegua, the Orisha of the crossroads and of change and of resistance, came to the Caribbean as Elegibo, and then to the southern U.S. as Mr. Legba, the god of change, who meets the blues man down at the crossroads at midnight and gives him new power and opens the door for the other Orishas. In the Southeast and the Caribbean, actual black rebellion by Maroons and black Seminoles and BIPOC escapees from slavery took shape in Stono's rebellion in the 1730s, and in the actual rebellion of Toussaint Louverture in the 1790s, and then in that of Jack Mansong, who was fictionalized as Three-Fingered Jack in the 1780s. A mixed-race rebel who later became a slave catcher himself, Jack was, within a few years of his death, immortalized in the theatrical show O.B. on stage, which dramatized the rebellion and referenced the syncretic Afro-Caribbean religion of Obeah. Putting black rebellion on the stage both tamed and monetized it. A rebel like Anansi or Three-Fingered Jack, or a minstrel character like Dandy Jim from Caroline, or even Zip Coon, embodied white fears about black resistance, about black agency. Putting these characters on the stage meant that they could be made to behave, to be tamed, as figures of tragedy or figures of fun. But the sheer emotive power of those characters, like that of the great dancer Bill Bojangles Robinson, and the great black comedian Hattie McDaniel, and the posh Duke Ellington, and the defiant Richard Wright, and the elegant and erudite Zora Neale Hurston, and the sexy and powerful Josephine Baker. All of these characters, when captured on the stage, in the identities they constructed for themselves, in the face of an entire system of monetized, industrialized oppression, represent the triumph of black creativity in the wake of systemic, endemic, and intentional racist oppression. From Anansi, to Legba, to Three-Fingered Jack, to Moms Mabley, to Flavor Flav, black creativity, black rebellion, and the triumph of black identity in the face of American racism have provided a vision of defiant liberation, courage, and community. As teachers, educators, public intellectuals, public elected officials, thought leaders, community members, activists, learners, and as citizens of the Republic, we have an inescapable and urgent historical obligation to tell and hear these silenced stories. Thank you for listening. A luta continua. The struggle continues.